I get used to the new year. So yeah, I think we're on the live streaming. So hello everybody from YouTube. This is the first meeting of the Build working group in January, if I'm correct. So yeah, basically we have a lot of topics in the agenda today. Let me set the link on the for the agenda on the chat. First of all, there is any announcements that any one of us want to make? Okay, I have a small, well, not an announcement, but a heads up. We are still working on the recovery of the Orca cluster for the macOS machines. So we expect to recover the macOS 11 machines that are causing some changes on the pull request for the collaborators, hopefully soon. You can track that on the issue that we have on that. The release machine is already working. It's been tested now. So yeah, we hope to get that working as soon as possible and unblock all the pull requests soon. So yeah, jumping to the first official topic in the agenda for today, which is issue 3618. Let's have a look. Let me set that on the chat. If I remember well, I think we have a nomination. Yeah, we have a nomination for Abdirahim, if I say that correct. I think he's also on the call, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that was correct. Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome. Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself also to the team, it will be nice. I know that Richard and Michael already work with you, but yeah, for the rest of us, you're kind of a new face, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Abdir Rahim. I've been working at IBM since 2019. I've always worked on open source technologies, and I've have experience with some Node.js packages as well, more directly for like IBM connecting to DB2 databases and things like that, integrations. More recently, I've been working with Michael and Richard, and contributing to fix test cases and trying to get the CIs back in order with the IBM machines, and it's been great. And I'm expanding and trying to just not focus only on IBM and IBM systems, but trying to help in other areas as well.
Okay, fantastic. That sounds good. Yeah. So yeah, I think there is a nomination to grant you access, if I remember well, to the test machines, if I'm correct. I think in overall it was a positive feedback from most of the members of the team, has been open for more than a week. So I think we can consider that as a green light. So officially welcome. And we are going to merge the pull request just now. So I assume Richard might make all the process to grant you accesses and so on because he opened the pull request.
Yes, I will talk to Abdir and get the all sorted.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Richard. So yeah, I think that was the first topic in the agenda. Next topic in the agenda, it's going to be a discussion on Nearform, how to relocate some of the resources that we have there. So it's going to be the issue 3615. So yeah, I'm not very sure I'm the most up to date on what's going on because it has been a long discussion, but I think maybe Richard or Michael are more up to date with this. And also Ryan's here, so.
Yeah, I can give a quick summary. I mean, the net is Nearform's, I think, closing down their data center or whatever place that they could store machines. So they're like, hey, we can't host your machines. We have some Mac machines there. Some we got some machines donated from Intel quite a while ago. So some big benchmark machines, and a couple of Windows on ARM machines that were used in early sort of bring up of that, but those aren't used anymore. So I don't think those are the concern. I think the two which are the concern is like the Mac ones, OS X ones, and the Intel machines. I think our recent, it's nice to have a second provider of OS X machines so that when one has one has a maintenance or whatever, we still have the other. So that's a good example recently of why we might want another one. And then the benchmark machines, the challenge is they've been kind of big physical machines. We need them to be like regular VMs aren't necessarily good enough because they need to have the sort of same resources every time, right? To be comparable. They don't necessarily have to be huge, but they need to be the same every time you do a run.
Yep.
So I think one of the reasons Ryan's probably here is we did ask, we've been talking to the foundation about helping out with some of the build stuff. This is maybe a good place to start since we need to find either like a new home for those machines or some equivalents. So lots of discussion in the issue. I don't think we've come to any conclusion though, right?
Yeah, mostly what I've been doing is as much, requirements gathering as I can get so that I don't make assumptions that are invalid. Things like, well, do we really need extra OSX? Oh, yes, we need 2 providers because they go down. Okay, that makes sense. And, understanding Mateo's needs for the build machines and how critical it is for them to be exactly the way they are. That's all very understandable. So, taking that information and going back to the team and figuring out, well, what can we negotiate and what can we do and who can we, excuse me, who can we approach to solve this? And, we don't have a lot of Mac OS testing experience in-house at all because we don't do a lot of build sort of things. They're, usually not built on Mac OS. So this is our relationships with providers like that. We would have to establish them, but that's the main goal is to just get those pipelines in the works so that we have it ready to go.
I think like on that front, if you don't have any existing ones and like we want to approach a new one, certainly like some of us from the project can come along. The hope was though that the foundation would start to lead and manage those relationships. So
right, and
hey, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, the idea being that once we have that road paved, then we can turn to say Electron and tell them, hey, look, we have relationships with the Mac OS providers. When you guys are building on Mac OS there, we have something established that we can also share with you, so that it becomes sort of a more widespread, standardized thing across the JavaScript ecosystem. But for this particular example, it's probably you guys and Electron that use OS testing, or Mac OS testing.
So I guess on that one, it's really on we're kind of waiting to hear. You said you've been doing the investigation, so I think the next step is kind of waiting to hear back from you in terms of like, hey, what can or can't you do so that we know what the next step is.
Yeah, and I'll approach our team internally. I've actually been on vacation for the last week or so not much has moved forward there. And they were all on an offsite for LF, like a all hands offsite. So everyone's been sort of out of the office for a bit. But starting tomorrow, I'll dig back in and see what we can do with the Mac OS testing. As far as the benchmark machines, yeah, that's another one where I do have one other idea with that because, I understand Mateo's hesitance to want to use a on-demand machine because, you never know what you're going to get. But I was thinking it might be possible to run a few of the benchmark tests against on-demand machines and compare them to each other to see how different they actually end up being. Like, just have AWS give us bare metal machines that aren't, VM polluted with, extra activity, but on demand so that, they're only running when we're running benchmarks. So we're not paying to have a machine mostly not being utilized, but critical when it is being utilized, that way we could have workloads that are not, to satisfy these sporadic workloads. So that would be something.
You don't have any places where like you actually have physical machines hosted?
Most of our stuff is cloud stuff. We do have some physical machine hosting, but I don't think that we're trying to there's nothing underneath the open JavaScript foundation umbrella that it has that relationship. It's all underneath like other LFIT stuff. So that is another thing we can explore. But again, our recommendation is typically if it's a sporadic workload, we try and find ways to use on demand pricing sort of stuff so that we don't have, because we would like to have a large machine with lots of processors and be able to run these tests relatively quickly, but then that's expensive. If it's not like used 24/7. So, you know,
Well,
that's
that's kind of why like cloud is great. Obviously, like the build stuff, the more the cloud we can, really those benchmarking machines have been the exception over the years. And
Mhm.
like one of those machines, like if we could just ship those machines and put them somewhere, forgetting the
Yeah.
management costs, it'd be way cheaper than anything else, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
that's probably an option as well. So
Yeah.
we could explore that. I'll see, you know, like, do we have racks somewhere that would be willing to host that?
Yep.
That's
exactly, because like I understand, like once you get beyond a certain size, it's expensive to have them just sitting there. But like machines, especially old machines, are actually pretty cheap. So
yeah.
it's that balance between like, yeah, we mostly want things in the cloud providers because like that helps us a lot. But like for the 1 and 2 things where that just doesn't fit, the other model might make more sense.
Yeah. And that was the only reason I wanted to explore the, you know, just running a few of those benchmarks against those to see if the model does fit. Because, you know, every machine is different out of the factory. They've all got, you know, any number of, you know, bad memory spots or bad disk spots or whatever that the machine has to work around. So I understand them being different, but how is it different enough that you'd pick it up in these micro benchmarks or not? And, you know, that was just a question I had, but we don't even really have to explore that if we can find a rack to put them. So
my thing is, I think it's going to be hard to get enough confidence. Like, okay, we get one, we run, we spin one up, we run it, we spin it down, we spin another one up, we run it. I don't know, like that doesn't give me confidence that tomorrow it's going to be the same or the next day, right? Like,
Yep.
It could be the next day after we do that, the provider adds in like one new machine type to the mix, and now you get crazy differences, right? And
fair point.
investigating those are very expensive, so it's kind of like in people time.
Yes, change happens.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly. Change
that's
happens,
true.
and it's sort of like so I think we could do some experiments, but like I don't know what experiments would convince me that it won't be a problem.
Fair.
Right? And I suspect you'll get the same feedback from other people, which is just where I'm sort of going with on that.
No, that's great feedback. So where is Nearform physically located? Do you know where this data center is?
They're in Ireland.
They're in Ireland?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So overseas. Because I was going to say, I know we definitely have like pretty strong relationships with the OSL and the open source lab. And that's, you know, many of our members were actually alumni from there. So, you know, we've got like, hey, Lance, could we get some rack space? And he would definitely be like, so.
Yeah, we already have quite a lot of stuff managed there.
Yeah. So that might be one of the better options, but cool.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know. Yeah, like if they could host them or even, you know, they may have machine, you know, and it's worth
that's the other thing is the
machines, right?
There may be, it might be more cost effective to buy something similar of the similar age and then the ship. Then it might not be.
Well, yeah, exactly, right. Like that's the thing. I think like on eBay and stuff, you see ones which are, you know, fairly inexpensive just because they're old. And yeah, you're right. Instead of shipping across the border, that could be way easier.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's that's on my to-do list next. Then is to kind of approach our team internally and see like what are our choices and options here, because you know, how we can facilitate this. Cool.
Yep, that sounds good. Two questions for me here that are maybe not very clear, but maybe have been discussed. What's going to happen with the Windows machines that we have there? Not very sure if we have to return them to the provider or to the people who provided us in the past, or they are from.
All the machines that Nearform are hosting for us belong to the Node project, or I mean, the benchmark machines were donated by Intel. But I believe the Macs and the Windows machines were paid for. We applied for funding from the foundation and bought them.
Okay.
So I don't know what's going to happen with them. You know, if we don't end up hosting them elsewhere, technically those things do belong to the project. I don't know what the actual paper audit trail is for them, but I do know that, you know, we as a whole paid for them through foundation funding in the past. So yeah, those the Windows ones were quite recent. I think they were last year or the year before. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to them. Like, you know,
I don't think we have a precedence for that. Like often the shipping is like expensive, but I'd be like, you know, if we can't really do anything. Is there some way we could have like a lottery among the collaborators or something, or and say,
Yeah.
hey, you
Well,
know, we have these machines that we don't need anymore, because then it would go to people who would like, hey, okay, somebody's got like a Mac that they can do some extra stuff. Anyway, but I don't think,
Yep.
I think it's more like once we figure out what we're going to do, then that would be a sort of a
Mhm.
follow-on thing. I don't know, Ryan, if there's any, you've seen anything similar in other cases.
Yeah, I mean, in most, I used to work for the Drupal Association on their infra team, and we had a lot of like donated hardware that ended up like, well, one of them ended up in Archie's garage. It was
Yep.
just they were kind of like too old to be worth eBaying or anything like that, and they're just sort of e-waste, and the effort to put in to recover anything out of it. The Windows ones, in my research, it did look like the ARM. Well, it just said ARM loaned them to us. I don't know if that means that they were expecting them back, or
Yeah.
who we talked to at ARM to get those. So maybe they would be like, yeah, we'll take them back, or
Yeah.
maybe they'll just be like e-waste them. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky question, because I think overall at the end, even if we don't have any plan for them like in the future to be used by us, but as part of the infra, I think definitely we should move from the offices of Nearform, right? So use it or not, right? So
Mhm.
that was my point. Like we have to find a home for these devices, if it's used by us, or maybe donate it to other people, or go through the collaborators, as Michael say, or something on that direction. But yeah, definitely, overall, we need to find a home for them, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, it's figuring out whether we want to keep using them, and if not, then the question of disposal is effectively disposal, isn't it?
Yeah, but I look at it as an opportunity too, right? Like,
Yeah.
if we can, if there's a couple Mac machines, I'm sure some people who would take them, and it's like, well, if it's too expensive to ship them somewhere else, like maybe that narrows the people we could give them to. But I'd see finding some collaborators we could give them to would be a win. And it's like, well, here's somebody else who's got like some of our platforms, and if they normally have a different platform, that helps them with the project too.
Well, for as long as Intel Macs continue to be relevant to it.
Sure. But
yeah. Anyway, it's
Okay, that's good. My second question is regarding the deadlines. Are we clear on the deadlines that we have from Nearform in terms of when we should handle the migration of the devices?
There was, I'd asked that question in the issue, and I believe there's an answer. I won't try and pull it out of my head. Well, maybe I will, but I think it's like, in my mind, it's kind of Aprilish is the.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I saw April 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have a little bit of time, but not a lot.
Yeah, that was my next question. Do we feel confident about this deadline, or should we ask them a little bit more time if possible?
From my perspective, I feel confident depending on some factors. Like if we can rely on Mac Stadium and Orca for our OSX testing, even though it's only one provider, while we spend the time to get a relationship in place and get everything working. And, I mean, a new provider also means new APIs and new consoles and new dashboards and, new tech for everyone to figure out and finding out, like I think that part would take maybe more time than April. But if we can continue testing and, limp along on one provider, then that sort of means that the deadline doesn't matter for the Mac stuff. For the large benchmark machines, that seems like an easily solvable problem if we can just find either where we're shipping them or where to find replacement machines. Like that seems like a relatively simple, like not a large, just new machines with new Ansible that bring them up. So if it's like that, I feel pretty confident. But if we have to have a second Mac OS provider, that might be tight.
Yep.
And I think, to be fair to Mac Stadium, most of the issues we've had there haven't really been, issues on their end. We've had occasional maintenance and stuff, but that tends to be fairly short.
Yep.
And it's something on our end with the recovery where, every time the cluster comes down and it comes back up, we're finding we're having to do remedial work to get the service back up and running, which is what Ulysses is doing now. And if we can solve getting the machines back to a workable state with
Yeah.
less time
Yeah.
having spent to do that, then I think we'd be in a better place. I mean, generally speaking, Mac Stadium have been quite reliable in terms of being there. And then available. It's other stuff that's happened around that, which has meant that, for example, now we've been probably about a week, is it, Ulysses, where we've not actually had. And part of that is because when we moved to Mac OS 11, the Neoform machines are all Mac OS 10.15. So even though we've got machines at Neoform, they weren't at the required Mac OS level. I've got a feeling they may actually be running 11, but the VMs are 10.15 still. I can't remember. It was a while ago. I saw some comments around whatever
definitely.
the host OS is and whatever the VMs are running. So it's a bit unfortunate that we don't actually have the we have machines, but not the actual they've not been upgraded yet to be a failover in this case. So that's why we've ended up in this situation where those CI stuff is just the queues growing longer and longer, waiting for machines to become available.
But I think the key point is like totally good point that the providers can be 100% reliable, which I think Mac Stadium has been a really good provider for us. But the thing is, even for like maintenance as an open source project, we have trouble keeping up, and we're not like we've got other jobs, so we don't drop things. When there's two, it's unlikely they're going to schedule their things at the same time. So it makes it a bit easier for us to cope with. Now, maybe that changes a little bit if Linux IT has got people, who are 24/7 available, right? Like, but for us today, having the two means that like, okay, there's going to be something going on here. We don't really have time to deal with it, but the other ones are still running so that we can deal with that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely it's tricky. I think also there is an additional challenge for us because we have to keep both like ARM and Intel working yet. And we use a very old version of macOS because we didn't have the time yet to upgrade. So yeah, we are like 3 major behind. So yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge because also the way like Apple defined the machines is not the same way as you have the Linux machines, which are super more thought on the way that provision and make all the scripts and so on. In Apple we have a lot of challenges. So yeah, definitely in bare metal also we have a really fantastic experience with Mac Stadium. In Orca as well, but I think most of the challenges with Orca, which is the platform that we use for many machines, is more related to our skills in terms of how to, commit the changes on the images and be more resilient. So yeah, that's because of that different technology. But yeah, definitely, I think it's a good provider. So yeah, and also it's a good way to have Intel and ARM machines together, which is a little bit tricky. And there are not a lot of options for Macintosh currently.
I mean, I think in theory, if we were willing to take a risk as a project, and I don't know how long Apple will support Rosetta on ARM64, but that's an option. But again, with everything which is possibilities, they all would require someone to set aside the time to work out how to engineer everything to do that. And so even with Orca, there's a model of using Orca where instead of having long-lived machines, they're all ephemeral, and you use the Orca API to bring them up and bring them down with the Jenkins ones. But again, that requires someone to figure out how to actually make that happen reliably, which I'm sure it's not impossible, but it's going to take someone some time to figure out what to do with it. So yeah, there's what we have, there's how do we keep it all running, and then there's also if people have time, how could we make it better or more resilient or whatever it is. Even things like the challenge you were having, Ulysses was saying, like Homebrew doesn't support Mac OS 11 anymore. I guess one of the open questions we've always had is how far back do we need to keep Mac OS? So generally on other platforms like the Linux platforms, we generally tend to keep platforms at some sort of base level, on the basis that if we build on those levels, then everything sort of in a bit newer than that should be able to run the binaries we produce. Mac OS is a bit like Windows, where you can target the binaries for older things, so not necessarily targeting for future things, but sort of targeting older things. And I think with Windows, we've already got to the point where we will upgrade Windows machines with a reasonable confidence that the binaries will still work on the older Windows OSs, even though they've been to a degree. And I think there has been sort of some assertions made in the past that we could just be running on the newest Mac OS versions and compiling for the earlier target, and that should, in theory, be okay. I know we've had challenges in the past with whether the hardware we've got will actually run the latest Mac OS version, but I mean that again is something, if we're running into problems with Homebrew dropping support for old versions of Mac OS, then maybe we need to look at the machines are always going to have to be on something reasonably current so that we can run Homebrew and stuff in reasonable time. But again, that's all reworking that I don't know if anyone has actually got the time to sit down and work that out.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky.
So from you, Ulysses, your question was like, are we okay with the deadline? It sounds from like what Ryan is saying, suggestion that like for OS X, we can have a little bit more of a transition, and for the benchmarking machine should be easier. Sounds like, the answer might be yes for now, but we should keep a close eye on that, right?
Yep.
That could change, like, as we learn more or whatever, it's maybe like, oh, maybe it isn't. But I think we got to kind of treat it as a fixed deadline, because it sounds like they're, they need to shut down what they've got there, and I can understand. So
yeah, that's for sure.
Like, we assume they totally go away at that day, and then it's sort of like, what do we plan based on that?
Yeah,
and the deadline is for exiting, so we don't have to move everything at the same time. We can move things as and when we've got replacements, as long as we sort of bear in mind we'll be out of the Nearform buildings around that sort of time frame.
That's a good point, Richard. Yeah.
And Richard, I think you confirmed that other than the benchmarking thing that we use the benchmarking machines for, you're pretty comfortable we could just point other jobs like the V8 jobs to other existing.
I am comfortable that we could run the V8 builds on other machines, including cloud VM machines. Obviously, the cloud VM machines are not going to be as they're going to be a lower spec than the benchmarking machines. There'll be less CPUs, less memory. I believe that we should be able to build V8 and stuff on a lower spec machine. It will just take a bit longer. And I guess we just need to. I think the only thing we need to be wary of is memory, because V8 seems to be getting more and more memory hungry. But I think 4 to 8 gig of memory isn't uncommon for a cloud VM.
But I guess my question is, those machines are gone tomorrow. What would we do? Like, do we just?
We would have to
another machine.
Yeah, we would move it to another machine. We would also probably need to take a machine and install a perf on there for some of the V8 tests that are only run on the V8 CI of the node. But again, I don't see that as a major thing, because we've got Ansible scripts to install those. So yeah, I'm reasonably confident we could take even like a Relate x64 or another Ubuntu x64. I think we have more options on moving the V8 builds, because while it'd be nice to be running on that high number of CPUs and memory, I don't think it's a necessity. Well, even with the benchmark one is more about the stability between runs, whereas for V8, I don't think we've got anything that says, oh, this V8 run has to be running in some.
No. It's just purely that they.
So
they had lots of power.
The answer is there will be some work on our part to migrate the Intel V8 builds to another machine, but I don't think in the grand scheme of things that's as much work as finding an alternate hosting provider or costing replacement.
But so, I just like so we're not so worried.
Yeah, it'll be work, but I don't think that would be. Yeah, we wouldn't be completely blocked. I possibly like a week or two. Yeah, if you would say they're gone tomorrow, then probably within a week we could get some replacement working for Intel, and that's conservative. I mean, it might only be a day or two.
So like in a month from now, we should probably take another look and say like, okay, what's the plan? Should we just move the V8 builds or not? Right.
Yeah, I mean, we could. If we've got time, we can start on that. Today, tomorrow. Time's always the thing, but I mean, we know we have to move it. If we try and set some time to we can start running those in parallel to what we've got, and be reasonably confident that they are suitable to take over the load.
Yeah, and just I don't know, like I was thinking like we may have a month. It depends. If we think we can squeeze that in March, then if they're just going to be moved, it'd be better if we did nothing, right? But
Well, even if they were moved, I imagine there'd be downtime.
yeah.
You'd have to sort of pack them up and yeah.
One thing I noticed in my audits is it looked like those V8 builds are all failing on those build machines, and
Yes.
have been for a long time.
Not always. So there is some sort of networking issue pulling stuff from Google's Git servers, which we were never able to solve. So it doesn't always happen, but it happens frequently enough that the builds are frequently failing.
I didn't see any successful ones in the history there. It was just like, so I just thought something was wrong with the machine, but
it seems to be a sort of networking communication. It's like it tries to pull down from Git and then Git throws some sort of socket error.
But I think, Richard, the net would be they run enough that we do get the run through that we need to do, right?
I believe so.
Right, like I know there's like a proposed upgrade. Those are run more of an ad hoc, like, you know.
I think at the moment it's a mixture of actual failures pulling down from Git, and those fail quite quickly. And then I think we also have some test failures around perf. I think there's some sort of change in like the new V8, which means that perf isn't the tests that are running perf are trying to scan for things in the output, and I think things are missing in the output, which I don't know. It's like sometimes the build succeeds, but the tests fail, and sometimes the build is failing before it even sort of builds because it's failing during the checkout phase. So yes, generally the builds are red, but they're not all blocked on the same issue all the time. But there are some issues that we have. Again, if we move to another machine, that might, I believe that will solve the checkout issue. Or I haven't seen the checkout issue anywhere else. And then we might still have, there might still be some V8 build failures on Intel, but that probably will be outside of the realm of the infrastructure.
Great.
Okay, should we jump to the next infra challenge? So yeah, we have another topic in the agenda, which is the Equinix replacement, which is 3597, which I'm not 100% sure of what is the current update for this.
Richard's the most up to date on that.
Yep.
So I did ping Brian in the issue, but he hasn't replied yet. So I don't know if he's around at the moment or out. Before Christmas, he made an offer or said that MNX were willing to host the machine. So we've got 3 Equinix accounts. One of the Equinix accounts is sponsored by ARM, so that's okay. We're not concerned about that account. And then we've got 2 other accounts. One is controlled by the Build working group. That has 2 of the 3 Jenkins workspace machines. And one of those Jenkins workspace machines has the temporary Git repository that we use in the Windows Fanned and ARM Fanned jobs. So that's where we build build node, and then we put that in the temporary Git repository and then pull it out on another machine to do the testing. That account is owned by Build, and then there's another account which sort of is sponsored by Equinix, but sort of was managed by MNX, although they've given a few of the Build members, like myself, and I think, Michael, you may have been given access to it as well, access to the account. Brian can only see the Equinix MNX account because he works for MNX and was handed the admin role of that account. So his initial offer was to migrate all of those machines onto the sort of MNX cloud as a provider thing. I asked about the 2 Jenkins workspace. He was asking what spec those machines are, so I was trying to point him at the machines are currently like this. We think it's more disk space rather than necessarily high CPU or memory. So I was trying to see whether his offer would include those 2 additional machines, or whether we would still need to find some additional some alternate host or provider, or some other place for those machines to be. And I haven't seen anything else about the MNX offer as to if that I presume it still stands or whatever it has. But even that, it sounds like that would be a sort of, I would class it almost as a new relationship. I mean, they're not new to us, but if it's going to be on another cloud that it's not currently there, then that's almost like it's another provider that I would rather we sort of had a formal or a clear sort of documented, this is how we would manage that relationship. And, if we have concerns or requirements that, that there's a proper process to go through rather than us sitting around trying to work out, well, who was the last person to speak to whoever on that side and trying to figure that out. Of the machines in the Equinix MNX account, the one I'm most worried about is the backup machine. And again, it's not so much the processing on the server, but the data. So, it's got a large 600 terabyte disk attached to it, which is basically all the builds of Node and IOGS and Jenkins configuration. Everything we've got is backed up to the backup machine. Now it's an open question about whether we can actually restore from it, because we're backing stuff up. I check every now and again and see the backup to there. We did do a partial restore 2 or 3 years ago now, when the release CI went down and we had to reconstruct it. That wasn't an immediate restore. It was kind of we set up a new server and then we were looking at the backups and making sure that the new server looked like the backup. So it wasn't like a restore from an rsync, but more a case of stand up a replacement server and check that the configs were the same and the jobs were reloaded. But the main point there is, I know that we cull some of the nightlies on the download server. Now, I don't necessarily think we need to resurrect the cold nightlies, but at the moment, those cold nightlies are still stored on the backup server. So in effect, the backup is, if the worst thing happened and we lost like the download server, the backup server is a way that we could resurrect all the old builds of Node that we've ever done. So in effect, at the moment, when we do a build of Node, it goes into 3 places. It goes into 4 places now. it goes straight to DigitalOcean. There is one machine in Equinix MNX which is like a mirror of the DigitalOcean droplet, but that's still a user-facing public web server. But then there's another machine which is the backup machine, and then the 4th place is R2 storage. But R2 storage is very new. But yeah, it's a sort of protection kind of risk, in terms of risk to the project. Backups are always interesting because it's like, well, if everything's fine, you never need a backup. But if something goes wrong, you need a backup, you really want it. So
I think we have other agenda items, right? I think the net is we're just waiting to hear if MNX is going to cover them or not. Do we know the deadline?
They made an offer. So again, for the Equinix, I think we're probably looking at similar timelines to the Neoform thing, which is probably around April. We can go back through Ed. He's been talking to Stuart, so Stuart wasn't able to come to this call because Stuart straddles both this project and Doctium, so it's easier for Ed to talk to Stuart for both projects. I know Equinix made an offer. I guess given that it would, are we okay accepting it, or is that something you want to discuss, Ryan, with the foundation as to whether that's all great, or whether that's something that needs to have a proper consideration, costing or whatever? Well, because I think they were going to sponsor. They were saying they were willing to sponsor it, but again,
and that was one of those things where it's like, if we had the thing to offer to say, well, here's your replacement, then that's what I would suggest. But that hasn't actually been established yet. And so when there's someone that's willing to step in right now, it's like, yeah, it's another provider in the quiver of relationships of, extra infra spread out amongst lots of providers. It is something we would eventually want to avoid, but I think given the time frame, it seems like something that, like, if MNX is generous enough to give us something, then mostly we just want to know, who it is that we're talking to, and who how long the relationship's for. Is MNX like, yeah, we'll start this up, and then 6 months from now they're like, well, we can't do it anymore. We wouldn't want to do that. So it's sort of
It's
definitely
not
wanna-
a new provider, it's just adding more machines than an existing one.
Well, no, it for us it would be a new provider because they would be migrating out of Equinix to their own cloud and sponsoring that account. So
Okay, and that's
it's
different from
So-
their other machines?
yes, because at the moment those machines are sponsored by Equinix. So the reason we're having to move them is because Equinix are withdrawing their sponsorship.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess
Yeah.
what I thought though, that it was MNX sponsoring in the same infrastructure.
Well, it sounded
they
like
are-
they were offering to host it on Triton. Is it Triton, their cloud?
Okay, so because MNX, I mean, they're already sponsoring machines, right?
That's what I thought, but then it sounded like actually it was Equinix sponsoring them. So I don't know. Is the question.
I
know
thought
that-
it was like MNX paying for machines in the Equinix infrastructure, but
But no, it sounded like it was actually Equinix that was sponsoring those, which is why we're talking about migrating them because Equinix have said they're going to stop.
not the
sponsoring
ones
them.
we're migrating, the other ones that, like you said, anyway, probably doesn't matter. Let's just, it sounds like regardless, Ryan's like, yeah, in the short term, let's just take advantage of the offer if we can. And we need to close on, does the offer cover things or do we need to scramble to find machines?
Yes.
Yeah, the risk of taking it on is, like you said, MNX is sponsoring some of the Equinix machines. MNX has their own cloud and their own infrastructure that they're offering to replace the other Equinix machines that are being removed. So it's a new cloud, it's a new API. I've never heard of MNX Cloud before, so I don't know if it's just a cloud reselling AWS or what they've built for.
I believe it has roots in Joint. So Joint used to run a cloud, public facing cloud, and then they spun all that off it was sold or spun it off to MNX. So it's almost like we're going full circle where originally Joint had hosting on their own cloud, and then that was moved to Equinix. It encompasses like the SmartOS machines. So I guess that's why MNX have a vested interest in in sort of maintaining a relationship with the project.
Okay, I think, yep, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I just because if there's something to wrap that up, but that's all my thoughts on it.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that because we have like 10 more minutes, so I was thinking we should go to the L2 migration. I'm not sure if we have the full forum to discuss today for this because I think
R2 migration. There is a PR open for Node. I have seen some back and forth between Michael Zasso and Flaky. I forgot his internet. So I think the PR is being worked on, and the last I saw there were some issues with some misbalanced double quotes, which is always fun. And Michael Zasso has been running a few test builds and that's how we're flushing out problems. So I guess the status on this is it's ongoing, it's being worked on, but it's not quite there yet.
Okay, thanks for the update, Richard. So yeah, I think we can jump if we are happy with the next topic in the agenda, which is 3390, which is regarding the near-form benchmarking servers, which
I think we've more or less covered that.
we covered that, right? Should we
that was
remove
part
it
of the
from the
night.
agenda? Because it's
I guess maybe we should look and see whether it can be folded into the other one, or maybe we keep it separate.
yeah.
I don't know. Part of the discussion was that it got sidetracked into these machines are quite old in terms of old Intel hardware, and whether some people were saying we should update that, but I haven't actually seen that come through as a formal request as to what they want.
I think we should just
talking about
close
the
that issue, right? Like that was an earlier issue saying, hey, we're changing some of our infra. Can you change IPs? It's like the answer, the ask now is like, we're going to get rid of them all. So like, I think this one is just like no longer
If we're happy
applies.
that it's covered by the other issue, then let's close that and don't direct people
Okay.
in the other issue.
I can do that while you go ahead.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, we can point to the new one, and that's okay. Yeah, we have two last topics in the agenda. Well, three last topics in the agenda. So next one is infrastructure for macOS 13, which is 3214. I didn't make big progress yet on it. I started to work with a new image to see if I at least managed to connect via SSH to macOS 13 as a first step, and later on see if we can Ansible. So in the previous attempt, I was working with the 12th version of macOS, but because it has passed a lot of time, we decided to move to the 13. So I think I might need some support for the Ansible part. So if anyone is willing to pairing with me a little bit, maybe in the next couple of weeks, if I manage to have a stable connection with the machine, it will be great because I'm not a super expert on Ansible. And last time I tried, we get a lot of issues in the 12, you know. So yeah, I don't know who want to help me with that, but yeah, I will write a message on the build team when we are getting close to that moment and see if we can pair a little bit for that. Yeah, I think.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it sounds good. Yeah, if it's just Ansible, I can possibly
Yeah.
out of it. I mean, I'm less knowledgeable at macOS, but Ansible I'm reasonably comfortable with.
Yeah, so it should be the mix of both. Will you find Richard? So yeah, the next topic is build helper role, and we have an additional topic which is about the Cloudflare access for Node.js Web Infra. Last time we discussed about it, we agreed that the way to move is the Terraform.
Yeah.
So I think we can remove the label from that one on the issue, and we can just keep tracking of the Terraform one, which is I think more straightforward. I made a request on the admin repository for the Terraform. I think nobody opposed it, but yeah, I see some +1 from some members of the build team. So I think we are okay. Not very sure if I need I need an admin level supporter to create a repository and so on. So I think maybe Richard or Michael, you can help me with that, and we can close that issue in the admin. Will be fine. So I can start to migrate things. Okay, so if that sounds reasonable, yeah, let's spend some time if we want to discuss on the build helper role or any additional topic that we want to discuss.
So the only thing I was going to say, I saw you updated. So you have an issue about the macOS cleaner, disk cleaner script thing. Yeah, if we can get that working via Ansible, like something in Ansible we can run that would run the cleaner scripts and clean the machines up, then once we have that working, we can look to maybe building like something in AWX to run that. And that might be a concrete example of something that we could then say, if people are willing to run this, when the machines are running low on space, because I have noticed that when the machines were up before everything, we were seeing a lot of alerts where the machines were sort of being low disk space and then coming back, low disk space coming back, and I was never sure whether it was just hitting the thresholds or whether any of the test runs when the disks were full were actually failing any tests because it didn't have enough disk space. So yeah, it's kind of, I did notice that there were a lot of alerts. So that script is a way of coping with that in the short term. Then if we can get that working via Ansible, we could hook that up and then reopen the whole build helper offer to see if other people in the other collaborators are willing to.
Yeah, that sounds good. Also, I was thinking on iterating a little bit the Jenkins alert so we can have different thresholds, depending on the host regex, so we can have, for macOS machines, we can be like, 98% when you raise that level, for sure there's going to be an issue. So that way we remove a lot of false positive because in macOS it's tricky because the machines are super tight in space. So yeah, that can be also another option to improve a little bit the experience of the alerts. Okay. Any additional topic outside of the official agenda? Okay. I will take that as a no. So then I think that's all for today. So yeah, we save like 4 minutes. So thank you so much. See you soon.
All right, thanks.
Later. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.